The respiratory system worksheet, this is the answer page. The worksheet has images that come from the Anatomy Physiology Revealed by McGraw-Hill. The specific features that I would like you to know from those images are as follows. The worksheet provided to you on Canvas includes these 4 pages for the respiratory system. On each page is going to be a list of features. You should be able to find all of these features on the slides here that are listed on the same page. Not all the slides will have all the features. I'd like you to complete the worksheet or identify as many of the features as you can on your own first. Once you have done that, then proceed with this video. You will learn a lot more if you make your own attempt first and then either see what you got wrong or identify things that perhaps you did not know before. But it's really important that you try it on your own first. The first page of this worksheet, we will go through 4 slides. On this first slide, we can see the simple squamous epithelial tissue is used to make up actually the alveoli. So each of the alveoli are these little circular pockets here. Surrounding each and every one of these alveoli are simple squamous epithelial cells. So it's not close enough that you can actually see the cells. It really is just these little lines that form the boundary of the alveoli that are simple squamous epithelial cells. This particular slide, we also see alveoli and simple squamous epithelial cells that make up the alveoli. They're a little more scrunched up in this particular picture. In this picture, we can see a blood vessel that's located here, and there's actually blood inside there. We'll check that off. And we can see a bronchiole. So the bronchiole is right here. This will have air in it. And what's lining the bronchiole or the airway is pseudostratified columnar epithelial tissue. So that is what's going around here. You'll see the dark purple. Erase this so you can see the dark purple at the bottom. That's actually the nuclei for that pseudostratified columnar ciliated epithelial tissue. So that's what's located there. In this particular one, we're so small that we don't see hyaline cartilage in here, nor do we see the goblet cells. In this slide, we can see the pseudostratified columnar epithelial tissue. That is actually this portion right here. So it's really tiny within there. That is the epithelial tissue. This is probably the trachea. So the lining of the trachea would be sort of along here. This would be the air within the trachea or a large bronchiole. The main reason why I think it's a trachea actually is because the hyaline cartilage is right here, and it's a really large piece compared to what the lining is. So it's quite a large piece, which I assume it's a trachea. So that's all you can see from this one. This is a zoomed in view of our pseudostratified columnar epithelial tissue. That's this whole thing. It's zoomed in just into this layer. I'm going to go back one slide. That is the same as this pseudostratified columnar in this little small area. So this small area I'm pointing to is this whole area that this is zoomed in. What we see here are goblet cells. That are these guys right here. These are the goblet cells. And the cilia are the little hairs up here on top of the pseudostratified columnar epithelial tissue. On this page, we will go through these 5 images of the larynx. Here, what we can find is the thyroid cartilage. We have the hyoid bone. We have the cricoid, the trachea. Pretty much that's all you can see from this view. Oh, we can see the epiglottis. That's a sort of rounded thing. On this slide, we can now see, you can see there's a couple more ligaments. We have the epiglottis, we have the hyoid bone, we have the thyroid cartilage, we have the cricoid cartilage. We can actually see the esophagus right behind it, and this here is the trachea. We can see it opened up now, so we have down here is our esophagus. We have our vocal folds. I don't think that's on the list, but we can see it. We have the thyroid cartilage, sort of cut there. We have the, just going to fill it in on this side and point to an arrow of either side. And this is our cricoid. On this posterior view, we actually see the esophagus. We see the epiglottis. It's probably all you can really tell from this slide picture. This one is a nicer, cleaner looking one. This is also a posterior view. We have the hyoid bone. We have the epiglottis. We have the thyroid cartilage. We have the cricoid cartilage. And we have the trachea. And so we've seen those in all the other views. The extra things that we can see here, this here is the arytenoid cartilage. So I'm just put a little triangle, so it's a triangle thing there. And then the corniculates are the solid little nubs at the top of it there. So I'm just going to put a little solid form there. On this next page, we have two images of a cadaver. It's quite beautiful dissections on these cadavers. We'll just go through the list here so I don't get sidetracked. The eustachian tube is located right there. You can see it's in the nasopharynx. It's a tiny little hole. The hard palate is the bony structure that makes up the roof of the mouth. And the soft palate is this posterior to the hard palate, and it terminates in the uvula. We can see superior, middle, and inferior nasal concha. So we have our inferior, we have our middle, and actually our superior is actually quite small. Those are our three nasal concha. You should know the purpose of them is to create turbulence. The nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. So we have our, just going to do the prefix nasopharynx. We're going to say here, this is our oropharynx. And sort of from this point to the top of the epiglottis is going to be our laryngopharynx. The epiglottis is located here. The purpose of the epiglottis is to actually cover our airway so food doesn't come down where air is supposed to go. So really the laryngopharynx is the last place that food and air are supposed to share the same space. The larynx is now below the epiglottis, and it is in this point that we can find the vocal folds within there. That's the vocal folds within the larynx. Immediately behind the larynx is the esophagus. So right here is where the esophagus, where food would go. Immediately below the larynx is the trachea. So the trachea is this portion here. It's a dead giveaway because we can see these cartilage rings. That forms the trachea. Here we can see the trachea, and then we have our left primary bronchus, and we have our right primary bronchus, and then we have secondary bronchi, which is the branches off that. So I just only put this one just to indicate primary is going to be the first branch, secondary is the branch after, and their name beyond that. The diaphragm is this membrane right here. It's actually thicker than a membrane. It contains muscle and it's very, very strong. When the muscle contracts, the diaphragm goes down, expanding the lungs, and then air is drawn in. That's how we inspire. So those two are the lungs. On this slide, you should know that tidal volume. So what I don't want you to do is a point and say tidal volume. I want to give you to give a range from the top to the bottom. Basically this range, that would be tidal volume. It's not a single point in time, that would be wrong. It is actually a range so that you know it occupies a span of volume. That's the tidal volume. Inspiratory reserve volume means anything above that you can breathe in, above the tidal volume. Likewise, expiratory reserve volume is anything below what you can breathe out beyond a normal breath. So this is a normal breath in and this is a normal breath out. Anything that goes further than that is going to be in our expiratory reserve volume. Residual volume is the leftover air in our lungs that we cannot blow any more out. This is, at this point, is the maximum amount of air that we can get out. But due to our structural anatomy, unless we're run over by a steamroller, we're still going to have some residual air in the space that our lungs occupy. Inspiratory capacity means we include this volume and this volume. So it's 2 or more volumes. So that's inspiratory capacity. What a normal breath in is plus the extra amount beyond a normal breath. Then we have functional capacity, which really should be functional residual capacity, and it is how much is left over after a normal breath plus the amount of oxygen that we can access in the residual volume. And then there's vital capacity. After a maximal inhalation, so this is maximal, and then we go all the way down to a maximal exhalation. So after you take a biggest breath that you can get in and can't get any more air in, you blow it all out and now you can't get 1 drop of air out. That is your vital capacity. You should be able to know the numbers. So you should be able to fill in and say, oh, this one's going to be 500 milliliters. We know vital capacity. And again, I would just want round numbers. For instance, vital capacity is 6,000 milliliters, or you can call it 6 liters. You can fill this out and name what each of the volumes are. They are listed in your notes. I generally just use round numbers and for the male value. That way you don't have to memorize male versus female. They really just vary more based on a person's actual physical size, not always gender, but we'll just use the average male values. So you should be able to start from 0. If we have our residual volume and we know that's 1,200 milliliters, then we know this part on the graph is going to be 1,200. If we have our expiratory reserve volume as 1,000 milliliters, then we know this value is going to be 2,200 milliliters. And so on. So if you want to be able to build your y-axis based on the volumes that you know here.